Aha. I mean, if you know how to clone stuff already, I don't know what you're doing here. That's fair. Yeah, this isn't going to be super duper in depth, but we are going to chat with them about some stuff and things and stuff of that nature. Ha ha, Hobbit, what are you doing awake right now? Hello, Hobbit. Welcome in. Oh my word, you must be sleepy. Oh my word. Oh my goodness. Good evening, morning, early. I mean, I don't know. Time zone. Good time zone. That's what we're here to do. I like those words. You know what? I won't ask because I don't think I want the answer. I mean, I do. Face tracking. Hello. That would be better. Yeah, it's better. I got my HUD back. Yes, I do. I do say Excel-y based things, and it's God Almighty help us all. It's fine. It's fine. Okay. I think most of the stuff is working, so I think we're gonna get started. Okay, so it's kind of stupid, but we're gonna have Linux help us copy Windows, which I feel is a form of irony about all of that. CloneZilla is a free utility that was produced by some fancy people that know stuff. I thought I wrote that down of who made it. Me with notes. Yeah, I don't have that. No. Hang on. No, wait. I need credit. Has to be where credit's due here. This is an open source project. I want the right words. Hi, Elstar. No, we're about this life. Bear with me a moment. Contributors. So it looks like James B. MacLean provided the idea and initial patch file for CloneZilla's box mode, which you're going to get to what that is. And then Chris, oh man, I'm bad with names. McColony, I think, provided the idea and programs to modify the Microsoft Windows host name directly within the CloneZilla, from within CloneZilla after cloning. But I do like though that they do give credit on who did the artwork for this. You know, I'm super silly about how I do stuff and things. I could just show you what I'm looking at, but that would require actually being good at streaming. And then stuff and things. You know, that's that's how it goes. I ain't even mad. Oh god. But yeah, so this is the so let me back up a step here. If anybody is interested in this utility, I am going to put the website to this in chat for you guys to check out. That is the direct page to the CloneZilla tool, and that is what will provide you the splash page for their tool. So what I have up on the screen right now is the contributions. So these are the people who, I'm going to give you a moment here just to look at this, that not only came up with the ideas. I'm stoked. They gave art credit. I do though. All right, now, hey, let me back up the school bus here. Throw the flashers on. Yes, that's the thing we're doing right now. The little stop sign's out. Has anybody actually heard of CloneZilla in chat? Because it's one of those things that, even though it's a fairly random piece of software, I actually heard about it from another IT professional, which makes me giggle because that seems to be how half of these oddball little utilities seem to tend to progress. Okay, Hobbit. Yeah. So this one's fantastic. So it's a little interesting. So the tool itself in nature, right, is a bulk cloning tool. It's an imaging server software. So what that would mean is that what we're going to do with it 100% supports, and it was something that I just followed their instructions on the website on how to make a bootable flash drive, which is very nicely documented on their website. But it was one of those things that in its most basic form, it is software that is designed for bulk cloning multiple computers at once. And let me see here. I think that's under their about page. I love this. They give you the full-blown, like, here's all the stuff and things. And it requires almost next to nothing to run this. It's hysterical. You need 196 meg of RAM to run it. I think most computers could do that now. Let me see here. Live CD USB, I think, is where we go for this stuff. Yes, yeah. Here's the about page for this. This is important stuff. Bloop and bloop. Nope, come on, the whole way. There we go. That's better. Now, granted, this is easier to read on the website, but just so I could talk and gesture at what I'm talking about here. CloneZilla is based on I believe Debian. I know, right? 64 meg. Seriously though, it says it right here on the requirements. Like, it's like straight up, like, I need next to nothing to run, which is hysterical. What you would normally do with this is you would build an image, right? And they have some documentation on doing that as well, of what you want a bunch of computers to look like. So you would install on one computer all the software you want, all the settings you want, and then take an image of it. So it's basically like, picture the idea of taking out a camera, right? And you snap a picture with it. And that's the state of the computer is in, right? Just like when you take a picture of a person or a protogen, the way they looked in that moment is what you see in the picture or snapshot. And that is exactly what this software does. It gets everything down to the little details into the image. And then you make bootable media to then... This is interesting. So you boot to the network, right? The letters are PXE. The way I'm familiar with pronouncing this is Pixie Boot. PXE. And what that does is it boots us directly to the network. So that means without any operating system, right? So Windows is an operating system, and that's what you use when you do stuff and thing on your computer, is you use the operating system. The Mac operating system is... it's another Linux distribution, more or less, or it's Linux based. But regardless, Mac OS is Mac OS. I'm not going to go into the semantics of that because, frankly, I don't know them. But I do know that it's Unix based. But that is the operating system you interact with. You move the mouse, you type on the keyboard, hacker voice, I'm in, and all that fanciness. But it's one of those things that's what you use. And what CloneZilla does puts you in a pre-boot environment that it goes and yells out on the network, hey, everybody, I want an operating system. Does anybody have one? And then the CloneZilla server you would set up would then reply back on the network and saying, yep, I'm over here. Have an operating system. And then it downloads it and installs it on the hard disk. And then you have a functioning computer. And that's an easy way to deploy a bunch of computers all at once. There's a bunch of different... what is it if it's over there? Exactly, it does. It yells it's over there. If you get into the Pixie boot mode, and there's no boot server, then nothing happens. I can actually show you the lack of nothing that happens. We can go into the pre-boot environment. I don't have a Pixie boot server. I do not have one of those set up. What we're doing tonight is just cloning 2 different hard drives. We're taking the data off of an existing computer and moving it to another disk. That's what we're going to do tonight. But there's some stuff that happens here, right? So when you want to do multiple computers at once, this is one of the softwares that can do this. There's other things that you can do multiple images of. Yes, Spice. What is your question? By all means. So yes, people still do use hard drives. And there's actually a couple different reasons why you would still use a hard drive. When it comes to storage capacity per dollar, right? So when we talk price per gig, what it comes down to is that the price for an individual gig is a lot cheaper than what it would cost for a gig of solid state storage. Right, so let me pull up real quick here. So if I did a 1 terabyte SSD and actually, you know what? Let's look at a 4 terabyte. Let's be something a little bit more comparable. No, there's reasons for this. Give me a moment while I find what I'm looking for here. 4 terabyte. All right, so we're going to say that a 4 terabyte or 4,000 gig comes at a price of, let's say like $280 pre-sales tax, right? And that's for an SSD. Right? So that's where we're at. And then, if I pull up a 4 terabyte hard drive, now I'm just going to grab the price of a consumer one. I'm not going to go into the serious details of the different types. But we're going to take a look at a 4 terabyte blue. That's pretty much the consumer grade. It's not even prosumer. It's even a little bit on the cheaper side. I mean, the blacks usually aren't even that much more expensive. Spinning rust. Yeah, tell me about it. I love this. The website, the vendor I'm looking at right now won't even show me hard drives. You still have relevancy. Give me what I want. I'm looking for what I'm looking for. There we go. Okay, so hard disk drive. Yeah. All right. So this is one of the Seagate greens, which I hate green drives, but that's okay. It's still 4,000 gig or 4 terabyte, coming in at $80 pre-tax. So what we would now want is our price per gig, right? So we're gonna do that, right? So our price per gig is taking. Let me see here. So we're going to take the price per gig. What's that? And then we divide that out by the price. Yes, I think so. Right, because if I then took 280 times 14-ish, yeah, that's what we do. Alrighty, so then we do that, and then I'm going to use that same formula. Bloop. Wait a minute, that's not right. Oh, I've reversed the numbers. It's 280. I'm confusing myself. 280 divided by 4,000. Yeah, that's what it is. Because it goes into change here. All right, so this is currency. So for all my Excel peeps, we're gonna come up here. We're gonna format this currency because this is what we're looking at. And it's English currency because yes, we have money. If we take a look right now, a 4 terabyte SSD, that works out to 7 cents per gig. On a hard disk drive, that works out to about 2 cents per gig. Now, for the average consumer, someone who just sits down and uses their computer, this is, for the most part, nonsense. It doesn't really mean a whole lot, because for most people, the additional 5 cents for cost per gig for the SSD, for the benefits of the faster storage, the fact there's no moving parts, the drives are more reliable in cases of shocks and drops, it makes sense to spend the extra 5 cents per gig. But where it doesn't make sense is in a high read-write environment where you're constantly hitting the drives all the time. Because hard drives, even though they're slower on read-write, they have, or they can be built to handle higher reads and writes, right? Because you can get a Western Digital Purple. That's the one that's designed for security systems. So that's specifically designed to handle a ton of writes, constantly writing the disk all the time. And the price per gig is cheaper. And in the case of a data center, say that you're one of these super big fancy companies, right? Well, you're not going to spend millions of dollars on SSDs to run your servers. You're more than likely going to just pop in hard drives, have as much space as possible, and away you go, right? So that's not too bad. So that's kind of the why behind that. Yeah, Elstar, what do you got for question-wise there? But yeah, that price per gig is it's a big thing when you're buying a lot of storage all at once. It really boils down to a serious amount of money in a hurry. And usually when you actually have those kind of environments, you're talking usually RAID array. So you have multiple disks working together, and then you just pop out the one that's busted, pop in the replacement of the same exact type, make, model, and speed, and away you go. Usually you don't mix and match makes models and speeds, because that makes RAID arrays very upset. Okay. So are you wondering if you can reuse the disk more or less? Because you can. You would just, want to format it first, if that's the direction you're thinking about going in. Ew, that's not good. Yeah, if you've still got the other disk in there, the original hard drive, I'd say disconnect that and reboot it with just the SSD a couple times and see if that error goes away. Because that's scary. It shouldn't be doing that. And this is another excellent example. Oh, it's just the SSD that's doing that. Okay. Scanning and repairing the disk. If it's almost every time you boot, that's probably not good. That could potentially be an SSD that's dying. And I would say run a disk check on that, which you can schedule within the operating system. Actually, I'll just show you how to do that. Let's see here. We're going to go to this one. Wakey, wakey. I know you're on. There we go. I'm not going to say it's likely to fail, but that's scary. So within Windows, if it's Windows 10, I mean, Windows 11 has this too. It just might look a little different. Your primary drive that you boot from, if you right click on it and go to properties, there are tools. There's actually a tab for it right here. And from here, you can schedule a check disk. By clicking that button, it then will schedule on the next time you restart your computer to check the disk. It could potentially take a long time, and you don't want to interrupt it if you do decide to do that. I absolutely recommend doing a little bit of research before doing this, just so you have an idea of what you're getting yourself into. But more or less what it does is it'll go through the hard disk's records, and then update and correct if there's any orphaned files, or other things within the operating system that could potentially have a problem on boot. I would recommend, though, if you're going to do that, to disconnect any other external storage from the computer. It realistically shouldn't bother anything, and I've never had an instance where that's caused a problem, but having less stuff connected when you're running a diagnostic is kind of a better place to be in. But yes. No, Hobbit, there wasn't a reason for it. I don't think I ever asked for it. I totally saw in the Discord I could request it, but I didn't. No particular reason. I appreciate that though. um Train of thought. Yes, disk management. Yeah, if you don't properly shut down your computer, that's 100% another reason you would see that message. But the thing is that after a complete correct shutdown of the system, you shouldn't see that. Another thing too, let me see if I remember where this is in the settings applet. Is fast startup. See if I remember where this lives. No, it's not in there. Give me a moment. Let me see where that lives. I don't like fast startup. I usually shut it off. Because so what is fast startup, right? We probably should start up with that. Start up with that. Ha! I made a bad joke. The puns are real. If AI is going to take over, they should just get it over with already. I'll have less to do then. Oh, goodness gracious. Choose what the power button does. Really? It's under that? Well, I'll be. That is where that lives. All right. That's fair. Okay. So this is a particular setting in Windows I don't care for. I'm going to check the changed settings that are currently unavailable here to unlock this. Thank you, Hobbit. Have an excellent evening. Train of thought. Yes. All right. Living under here. Fantastic. This setting right here. Turn on fast startup recommended. I don't like that setting. I'm going to shut it off and save it. So fast startup, what that does is it partially suspends a part of the operating system when you shut down. It's not sleep, it's not hibernate, it's fast startup. It's separate, it's a different thing. It accomplishes a somewhat similar task to the other two, but it does them a little differently. And one of the things that happens is that if you shut down the computer and turn it back on again, then it does that small amount of save state. You don't start from a truly clean boot up. Which means that if you want to reboot cleanly, you have to actually wake up. You have to start your computer and then immediately reboot it. If you want to just truly start from off. I don't like the idea of that. And if something's happening on your computer during that saving state, when it goes to shut off and then comes back on again, it could potentially be that that particular setting may not be fully compatible with your hardware. So it's recommended to leave it on, but if it's causing trouble, that's why you can shut it off. That's definitely one of those. We got fighting words, 100%, because it sucker can be rude. Okay. So before we clone this computer to another hard disk, we're gonna talk about a little bit of stuff here. So let me pull up the partition manager. I meant to actually show you what I typed. Let me try that again. So I typed part in the search box, and then at the top, create and format hard disk partitions. This lives in the legacy control panel, but it's just easy enough to just do that and make it appear. Okay. So we're going to see a couple of things in here. Currently, I have the disk connected that we're going to be cloning to. That is the one that is unallocated, and it's got a black bar. So that means that this one has got a couple things going on. It has no partition table, and it's not visible in the operating system as it stands right now. What I mean by not visible in the operating system, if I come over to here and go to this PC, we see 3 drives. We see the CD-ROM drive, which currently is empty, the local C drive, which is the actual operating system drive, and then the flash drive. I don't know, Spice. That's an excellent question. You gotta love. This technology's come a long way. It's not too shabby. The we're going to boot from the flash drive, which has the CloneZilla on it. But as you notice, I only counted 3 drives, and we have 4 in disk management. Why is that? Well, technically speaking, we could actually use up a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 letters we could technically use if we really wanted to. The C drive is the one that gets mounted by Windows automatically, and you see it all the time. There's 2 other partitions, though, that Windows makes that you don't normally see. The system partition, that's 100 meg, that shows up at the front of the partition table. And then there's a 500 and change-ish, what is that, 509 meg healthy partition, and it says in parentheses on the back there that it's a recovery partition. So, why does Windows take up this additional space? It's not a lot, but why is it there? Well, the reason it's there is that when you click the power button on your computer, the BIOS, which is the little program that lives in your motherboard, looks for an operating system. It needs to know where to boot to. So on your hard drive, there has to be something to indicate to the BIOS where your operating system lives. Because Windows knows that it's the C drive, but the motherboard doesn't have a clue whether it's going to be Linux, whether it's going to be Windows, whether it's going to be iOS, Android. You could throw anything at it, right? And as long as it's compatible with your motherboard, it could boot it. But the thing is that unless there's something on there, unless there's something on there to indicate where your operating system lives, the computer can't boot. So if I were to actually delete these 2 partitions, this one on the front and this one on the end, this very left alone partition that's healthy won't work. The computer will not start because this first 100 meg partition is the one that indicates, it says EFI on here. There's 2 different types of booting method. There's EFI and there's MBR. EFI is the newer version of boot that's built into Windows. EFI that goes hand in hand with UEFI, which is the actual type of booting. This gets a little confusing. There's so many different words that go with this. Terminology, yeah, gotta love it. This small partition basically says to the BIOS, Windows is over there, and then points over here to this one, right? So if I were to just open up this and go into C and copy all these folders to another hard drive and then try to boot to it, it's not going to work because what I just did is copy a couple of folders, but that doesn't set up these partitions, right? So that's why you need a cloning software to take your actual full setup, these 3 things, and put them on the hard drive, not only on the hard drive, but also in the right order on the hard drive. If this 100 meg partition's behind this, I don't actually think Windows would boot. I've never actually tried that, but I always know that when you look at a functioning operating system that's Windows-based, this one's first. And then on the end, there's the recovery partition. Now what that is that within Windows, if Windows fails to boot, there is the pre-boot environment or the PE environment that attempts to recover the system when Windows does not start. So the bootloader can be smart enough to know if Windows is broken, start on the little partition on the end here and try to bring the chest paddles back. You know, you grab the chest paddles and you go clear, ka-chunk, and then hopefully, you know, it can bring the computer back to life by using the startup repair, which is automatic. In 9 times out of 10 I've used it, it doesn't work. But that's just a part of it, right? But there's also a command prompt that you can pull up within that pre-boot environment to be able to run commands against your operating system in hopes of getting it working again. Now, generally speaking, if your computer won't boot, which is bad, almost always you would have to make a recovery stick or use one of your backups. This is why we take backups. This is why I talk about backups. I could bore you to death with the idea of taking backups of your stuff, because if I just copied the files out of the C drive, all the documents, the pictures, the videos, and then the computer dies, the hard drive just flops. I can't throw another hard drive in the computer and copy those files to it. It's not going to start because there's no operating system. But that's just it. That's why you use backup software. But if you don't use backup software and you're one of the many people that are just ride or die, if your hard drive dies, so does all your data, you're up a creek. But if the operating system gets corrupted thanks to one of the many versions of Windows updates that just say, we're going to improve it, and then your computer doesn't start, and you go, oh, that's not what it was supposed to do. Well, yes, it wasn't supposed to do that. But in case it did, there's ways to get it back. But I'm not prepared to show you how to do a Windows recovery, but this is certainly the place where I'm going to take you all down for a moment, because the reality is that what we're doing is cloning it, right? So this is the same thing as putting a RAID array into RAID array level 1. Everything that's on hard disk 1 is going to end up on hard disk 2, so that you can actually suffer a single hard disk failure, and everything that's on the first hard disk is available in the second. Without a RAID controller, it wouldn't actually work that way, but if you had cloned your hard disk, and I put the spare one in this computer on the shelf, and then the computer dies, I could just go grab the hard disk, plop it in the computer, click the power button, and we're solid. Everything exactly the way it was set up in that moment in time is going to be exactly the same. Windows is not going to have a clue that anything has happened in the meantime. It's very fancy. But, okay, so, major disclaimer. Making changes to your operating system is bad if you don't know what you're doing. I recommend research. I recommend research all the time. I'm gonna further the idea of this. Hang on a minute. Where's my mouse? Listen. If you're following along with this, I need you to understand something. Do this at your own risk. I would recommend using a computer that you don't necessarily care about if you want to try to clone one. But by all means, back up your stuff. Okay. I know what I'm showing you is only destructive if you do it wrong, but there's plenty of opportunities in the software to do it wrong, especially if you clone the wrong direction. I could absolutely clone the empty hard drive onto the full one, and you know what's going to happen? I'm going to have 2 blank hard disks. I don't want to do that. I'm going to try my best not to do that. But I need you to understand, you need to be careful. Read plenty of documentation, do your research. Like I said, there's other programs that look nice. You could spend money on ones that are like drag and drop style, like the Windows operating system. Macrium. Macrium Reflect is a fantastic one. It costs money in a commercial environment, and it's free for personal use. That one I would 100% recommend if you're going to do this yourself. I'm not showing you that this evening because Twitch is technically a commercial environment, and I'm not sure if I can show you that. This one's open source, so I know I can. That's why we're here. That's why we're using this one instead. But, okay. Enough stalling. We're going to break a computer. Okay. I'm going to go back to the video capture. Bloop. Okay. And I switch mice. So the goal. Here's the goal. We have local disk 0, which is our C drive, our Windows installation. We're going to use the live media to copy these 3 partitions that we see here onto this disk that currently has nothing partition. There's no partition table here. The disk is actually considered offline. If I were to right click on this, I can actually bring the disk online, and then it's going to want to add a partition table. We're not going to do that because we're going to use some software to actually use this disk. So I'm just going to close this. And then this is an HP based computer. Every computer has a different boot up key. In the case of HP, I'm going to use the F9 key on my keyboard to boot into the flash drive I have connected to the back of the computer. So if I have things positioned correctly on the bench over there. Yes, we have a flash drive here that's connected, and then we're cloning to this external hard drive enclosure. There's a hard drive in here. And there it is. So it's HGST brand. This is the empty one. It's actually important to know that because this is the empty one. We absolutely do not want this to be the source. This is the destination. This is where we're going. Inside the computer is the actual hard disk we're cloning. Yes. What do you mean, what the heck is that? That's the back of the computer. Isn't that exciting? That's a little Dell, not Dell, listen to me. It's an HP workstation. Okay. You and your Mac operating system, I'm telling you. All right, so we are going to reboot the computer. If the keyboard can listen to me, that would be great. Oh boy, the threat protection's turned off. Tragic. It's almost like I don't use this computer, and it's specifically for lab environment material. Fancy that. All right, I'm going to reboot the computer. when I hit reboot on the keyboard, I'm going to click the F9 key a whole bunch until we go into the pre-boot environment. Actually, excuse me, we're going to go into the environment that allows me to choose what we're going to boot into. Enough of my words. Now, this is one of those things that you absolutely need a capture card. So that I could capture. So the BIOS is an interesting thing. It's very difficult to capture on a laptop. It generally doesn't tend to like that. So there's the HP logo. Super fancy. No, did you seriously not capture my... I think I might have been hitting the wrong key. Excellent. Yes. All right, hang on. Yeah, either that or didn't capture it. This is what's not supposed to happen. Is USB-A dead? Nah, not really. There's so many drives that still use it. I know that the world's trying to move to USB-C, but frankly, the reality is that there's so many people who still use USB-A. I still think it's going to be around for a while, in my opinion. But it's just that, an opinion. All right, I'm going to reboot this again and be closer to the computer, and hopefully my keyboard works this time. Take two. Gonna restart the computer. Let's see if we can make it play nice this time. There we go. All right, I specifically tested with this keyboard to make sure that it would let me go into the BIOS menu. But you know, it's like that sometimes. Okay, so we are now we're in the back rooms, folks. In the back rooms is the software that boots your computer. And this is one of the smaller menus. This is not the BIOS menu, this is the boot menu. So from here, we can choose the different things we're going to boot to. So as it stands right now, there is, and it's going to make me that way. Yep. Okay, there we go. So at the top is the Windows Boot Manager. So the BIOS already knows there's a Windows operating system that is currently connected to this computer. There's UEFI general, I can't read, general USB flash disk. And then under legacy is the CD-ROM drive, because I could pop in a disk. And down here is the other, actually, does it show up here? Yeah, SATA 0. Okay, so there's SATA 0 and network controller, Realtek PXE or Pixie Boot. I mentioned that earlier. This is where you would do that. After we clone this computer, I'm going to come back in here and show you at least what this would do. So I don't, get stuck in the wrong menu again. Which it won't do a lot, frankly, but we'll come back to it. But yes, so I have I have the flash drive attached that is set up as a CloneZilla flash drive. So I'm going to boot to that. I'm going to click enter on the keyboard. And it said, welcome to GRUB. Yes, we're not talking about food. We're talking about the GRUB bootloader. Okay, so the top option is the live, which is what we want. I'm going to select that by clicking enter. And then we're going to wait patiently as it boots up the operating system from the flash drive. Now we're going to see a lot of hacker-looking like stuff on the screen as it swings by at 100 miles an hour, but we just have to wait until the menu loads. I was kind of hoping this would tell me what the GRUB... Oh, there it is. So GRUB stands for Grand Unified Bootloader. Because I actually want to know what it is, too. It's the software that loads specifically a Linux kernel operating system. Oh, geez, I remember parallel ports. Oh, my goodness. Those things were crazy. Super ridiculous. Okay, so the first thing you're going to notice about CloneZilla It's a very unusual looking operating system. It's not command line, but it's also not a true graphical user interface. There's another name for what this type of operating system is. I don't recall what it is off the top of my head, but it's kind of one that's in the middle. Yeah, your eyes. Tell me about it. In Windows, we're so scared about the idea of a blue screen. Well, the CloneZilla is like, fight me. I'm always a blue screen all the time. Yes, there is no eye protection on this one. You got to be careful. It'll burn the eyes out of your brain. My goodness. Yes. Okay, so we're gonna choose English because that's the one I can read. All right. We're going to keep the default keyboard layout. And then we're going to give this a minute. We're going to start the CloneZilla service. Okay. And from here, I need to switch for a moment. Does the bug receive response? That one, right? Look at that one. Okay, so this is going to be a device to device, second option. Work directly from a disk or partition to a disk or partition. Okay. So now that we've done that, it then asks us what level of pain we want to cause ourselves. Do we want the beginner mode or we want expert mode? Well, I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to use the expert mode, not because I have any idea what I'm doing. Oh, far from it. I just want to show you all the options. We're going to use the expert mode for all the wrong reasons. But that's okay. I can pretend to know what I'm doing. Oh, goodness. Okay. So, something to note. CloneZilla is perfectly fine if you're going to clone two of the same size disks. So if you have one that's 500 gig and another one that's 500 gig. So that could be a 500 gig hard drive that you're going to clone to a 500 gig SSD. That's totally legal. The software will do it. You could also go from a smaller drive to a bigger drive. You could take a 500 gig hard drive or SSD and clone that to a 1 terabyte, 2 terabyte target disk. It's okay with that. What it's not okay with doing is going the other way. If you have a 1 terabyte disk and you want to send that over to a 500 gig hard drive, it's going to tell you that the disk is too small. Now you may only be using, say, 300 gig on that 1 terabyte hard disk, but the default way that this software works, it won't permit it. That's why I kind of recommend the Macrium in its free version for doing this, because that one's smart enough to know how to resize the partitions. This one I'm pretty sure is capable of doing it, but to be completely honest with you, if I'm going to do the whole resizing of partitions, I'm going to use one of the other pieces of software. I'm not knocking this one. This one's fantastic for going, as long as you go the right way, right? Either that or you want to work specifically with partitions. I'm just going to work with disks because I want to live. It's not super complicated, but it can get kind of messy. All right, so we're going to do disk to local disk. And then we're going to wait here for it to say some stuff. Okay. So this is the part where I need to not screw up. So I'm going to look at the other monitor again so I can see this. Okay, so as I mentioned and shown on camera, the HGST is our destination. Right now it wants the source, so I'm actually going to select the disk that's on top. Okay, and then from here, it now wants to know the destination. It says in giant capital letters, I'm about to destroy whatever disk you give me. Well, there's only one other one connected, and it automatically knows to exclude the flash drive that it's booting from. So there's only two disks connected to this computer. One inside of it, and then one connected through that USB enclosure. Okay. Now, as I'd mentioned, I've turned on the advanced mode. So the advanced mode then proceeds to show here all of the other options you can toggle on or off. The one I'm gonna do here is toggle on the play sound because I don't know what that sounds like. So we're gonna play with some stuff here. Yeah, I'm a cutie pie. Okay, so I'm using the arrow keys on the keyboard to roll down to the bottom option. I hit the space bar to select that. And then to get to the OK, there's no mouse. You're doing everything from a keyboard when you do this. So I'm actually going to hit tab on the keyboard until it says OK, highlighted in orange, and then I'm going to click enter. Okay, so this is one of those things that the operating system can be checked for errors and then corrections, kind of like the check disk that's built into Windows. There's nothing wrong with this operating system, as far as I'm concerned. So we're not going to do that. We're going to skip that. Okay, this is by far one of my favorite screens, hands down. Set the advanced parameters. If you have no idea what you're doing, keep the default values and don't change anything. Just press enter. And that, my friends, is what we're gonna do. We're not gonna change anything. We're gonna leave that menu alone. Okay, and then this is what to do when it's done. So we're just gonna leave the choose option and click enter again. Okay, so behind my VTuber is it telling us to press enter to continue. I'm gonna do that. All right, before I continue here, I want to hide myself here so you can actually see this on the screen. Grab my mouse. Okay, so on the screen right now, it says right there, are you sure you want to continue? And that's telling us right there that it's going to erase the target hard drive with the source one we provided. I know I've got it in the right order because the target is the HGST. That's the brand of the hard drive. I'm going to click enter. And then it asks it again. Are you sure you actually know what you're doing? Well, the answer in this case, for the once, is yes, actually. So yes, we do want to continue. And lo and behold, everybody, hold on to your hats. We're about to cause some mayhem. So there's going to be some stuff that's going to appear on the screen here. It's just going to roll through this. It's going to collect some info. It might apply for a mortgage. I don't know. It's doing something. And while we wait, it's going to roll through some info on the screen here. So we're just going to patiently wait for that to finish thinking. And then it's going to actually go into the cloning mode. And there's going to be a separate dialog that's going to pop up for that. Oh, 100%. This is easily one of the scariest looking things apart the Linux operating system. Because what normally happens in the Windows operating system is quiet mode. It doesn't show everything it's doing in the operating system. This is called verbose mode. It shows you everything it's doing and the results of everything that is done. Yeah. It's kind of scary looking. But remember how I mentioned that there's 3 partitions on our source disk? The first recovery partition, Windows, and then the third recovery partition. Oh, excuse me. Technically, the pre-boot, right? So the 100 meg partition is first, and then Windows, and then the third one that's that recovery partition. So this is actually going to run through the clone thing 3 times because it's going to run this for each individual partition. So it did the first one. The second one's actually copying the Windows file. So this one's actually going to take a little bit here for a minute. And then it'll do the last one. And that one's quick because it's only 200 or 509 meg. Now, even though the partition on this 500 gig hard drive is approximately like 400-ish gig, I think, it does copy everything. And that also includes the blank space. Blank space copies fairly quickly because it still sets up the whole partition. Because it doesn't adjust the partition. It leaves it exactly the way it was. All a partition is a logical container to hold your stuff. And your stuff could be pictures, music, bootloader files, system files, anything. Anything that makes the computer do the computer thing lives in that partition. Which is okay, because we need those. Without those, your computer wouldn't be a thing. We need those. So it's just going to do its thing, and then we're going to chill here for a couple of minutes. Thankfully, this is a very small hard drive, so this won't take very long. We're just going to wait here while this just kind of cruises along. I've never actually heard the sound it makes when it completes, so I'm going to apologize in advance if this is loud to you. We're going to see. I don't know what it does. I doubt it. I doubt it's of air horn quality, but just be aware. It might be loud. Now, something that's kind of fun with the whole cloning disk thing is that this software is more than happy to let you clone your Windows operating system to anything. That could be a flash drive, that could be a micro SD card, and it won't care. Now, what will care, interestingly enough, is Windows, because Windows doesn't like to boot or install on anything that isn't already where it belongs. So if I were to actually clone this to a USB flash drive, I don't know if I can convince the bootloader to actually boot. And that's not necessarily because it's not that the storage is wrong, but I believe that they changed some stuff in the newer version of Windows that prevents it from doing that. For a little bit of time there, Windows did have a Internet of Things version of Windows. I think it was based on Windows 10, if I remember correctly. I'm actually going to look that up. I don't remember what version it was. I think it was Windows 10 based. Windows IoT. Yeah, Windows IoT Internet of Things operating system was released in 1999. No, that can't be right. Oh, okay, Windows 80K for Windows 10. So it was, all right, so the embedded version of Windows was actually based on Windows 10. But they stopped doing it. I don't remember why. I'm actually going to look up the end of life here. See what it was here. It's been a while since I looked at this. I thought about doing it. I was setting up a device to play with this, but I never got around to actually doing it. Excuse me. Oh, interesting. Okay, so it hasn't disappeared just yet. I am incorrect in that statement. Windows 10 Internet of Things Enterprise Edition will reach its end of support October 14th of 2025. The current version is 22H2, which is the same version of the normal Windows 10, whether that's Enterprise or Pro or Home. And all editions will remain in support monthly until that time. Let's see, when was it released though? Windows 10 Internet of Things Enterprise Edition start date was July 29th of 2015. Okay, so that sounds more correct. Because this was something that came out. I don't want to necessarily say combat with the Raspberry Pi, because that's not really the phrasing I think I'd use, but to be a alternative to the Raspberry Pi, because it was a very lightweight based version of Windows that allowed you to run one thing on it. Because normally within Windows you could run multiple things. But with the IoT version, it limited to how many things you could do. Oh, yeah, Raspberry Pi. So Raspberry Pi, for those of you that don't know or looking at me strangely, I'm not talking about food again. I'm talking about a credit card sized computer that you could hook up stuff to. You could hook up sensors to it, and it runs on an ARM processor. So those are the same kind of processors that are in your cell phone. That you then can install Linux on and install fancy enough, Raspbian is the version of Linux that runs on the Raspberry Pi. Yes, I don't know why everybody in the Linux world is a foodie, but that just seems to be the way it goes. I ain't mad about it, but that just seems to be. You can get hungry talking about these operating systems, because it sounds delicious, frankly. Nope, looks like we're almost done. I don't know if we're going to hear the sound actually through my capture card. It does capture sound, but I'm not sure if the Linux distro is going to find it or not. I was thinking about it. Come on, you can do it. I believe in you. I know you're almost done. I know, right? It sounds delicious. That's like Android, though. Oh my goodness, Android with Android Kit Kat, Marshmallow, Lollipop. Seriously, I'm telling you, everybody, it's food. It's always food. It's ridiculous. I love it. It's ridiculous by design. Oh my goodness. I mean, I can't say I blame them. If I made my own operating system, I'd probably call it something incredibly goofy too. And I'd be totally on board for doing that. Because that's just okay. Oh my word. Straight up not even mad. Oh, yeah, we're still beeping and booping. I'm gonna hide myself for a minute here, so I don't know if I should get up and turn around and go to me, and I'm gonna go boop. Okay, we have reached the end because it's waiting for me to press enter to continue. Okay, so now that we've reached this point, we are going to power off the computer. So what we're going to do is we're going to power the computer off, and then I'm going to show you that we can take that hard drive and pop it in the computer to boot to it. Now, what I don't have is I don't have a cage for the 2.5-inch hard drive that's in that little enclosure. But I'm going to pop the side off the computer, and I'll show you a little bit about that. So I'm actually going to choose the power off option, click enter. Four, three, two, one, contact. Blip. I love that the Linux operating system gives you that countdown. Alrighty, folks, the computer's off now. That means it's time for us to wander over here. Okay. So what we're going to do is we are going to disconnect the power from the computer first. So we're going to unplug that so that we don't damage the machine. I'm going to disconnect my boot media and save that for later. I'm then going to disconnect our drive that we cloned. I am going to remove it from this enclosure. And this is toolless, so all you have to do is actually just pop that off. And then the drive comes out like that. So that I'm going to set aside, as am I going to set aside the enclosure. So now, it may have a USB, but it won't do anything because there's nothing in it. Okay, and I'm going to disconnect my capture card so we don't damage that. And then I'm going to rotate the case here. And we're going to take the side off. Yeah, well, I mean, if you had a 2.5 inch hard drive, that's it. That's what these little guys look like. Um, the 3.5 inch on this particular computer, um, HP. Let's set this aside over here. HP is really good at hiding these things in a place where they're a little hard to see. Um, underneath here. So this is the connectors for the optical drive that's in this. I'm going to remove the power. I'm going to press, there's a locking tab on this, very important. Press down the locking tab, pull back. If you don't click the little locking tab, you will 100% damage the machine. Got to be careful with that. Now, I don't have to, but I'm going to. On these HP computers, this little green tab, if I push this, there's the optical drive. I took it right out of the computer. And something else I could do, if I had this, and say that I forgot to take the CD out of it, right? People don't use CDs anymore, but if I did, on the front of it is this tiny little pinhole. And what you do with the paperclip, as you probably have already figured out, is that you click it. And lo and behold, I've opened the optical drive. If there was a CD in here, that's how I can get it out without powering on the computer. Or heaven forbid, if the drive died, I can get it out without having to fight it. And that's just, how it be. Now it's locked in place now. And you can see on the back here, that's the connector. Now this is proprietary to an HP computer, which is why the power connector is so small, because it was specifically built for this little computer. This is a proprietary power connector for the proprietary CD-ROM drive. You cannot take the CD-ROM drive and put it into a different computer without something that could get the power from a normal SATA connector, which would be one of these. This is a normal SATA connector. I can't plug that into the back of this. It's the wrong size to get it from this size down to this size. I'm sure that it's possible to get an adapter for it, but to be completely honest, it doesn't really make a lot of sense to do that. It would just make more sense just to get your hands on one of those appropriate sized drives that aren't proprietary, like this one is. So yes, all right, took that out. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the face off of this computer. Because I believe that I have to remove some screws in the front to take the bay out. So that comes next. On the HP here, our little friendo has tabs. We've got tabs 1, 2, and 3. All you do to take the face off is you lift on these, and then it will come off. So I'm going to lift, lift, lift. And off it comes. And by looking on the front of this, looks like there is a total of 2 screws holding the cage in place. So the cage I'm referring to is this right here. Now, before I go any further, I'm going to also disconnect the cables to the hard drive. Now, I already disconnected one of them. This is the power cord for the hard drive. We have to be careful that we don't accidentally, mess things up here. I also need to disconnect the the data to this. Now, the one for the CD-ROM drive had a locking tab. Not all SATA cables have a locking tab on them. This one in particular is a 90-degree angle one that does not have a locking tab. All you have to do is pull back. And it comes off. Now you can see it's 90 degree, right? So it's got this little bit of an angle to it, but there's no tab. There's nothing to click to release this. So if the cable feels like it's stuck, it could very well be because it has a locking tab on it. Very important. Now the thing is that even though this end actually doesn't have a locking tab, the motherboard side, which is down here, absolutely does. I can't pull up on this and release it because there's a locking tab. I have to actually push in and pull up to remove the cable other end. You can see the locking tab on it. Little pushy guy right there. And then all I have to do to push it back into the motherboard is push down, and I can't pull up anymore because it's locked in place. Yes. Sellotape. Yeah, no, that's okay. They still lock into place. You do feel them seat. So as you can see here, there's a bit of a notch inside the connector head here. If I hold it this way, it might be a little bit easier to see. The camera's not going to focus for me. But you can see there's a bit of a shinier area here, and then there's a more matte color of plastic here. That is because that is where it ends. Once you're up against the matte color of plastic, it's plugged in the whole way, and you're off to the races. These are keyed, by the way. If I flip it over, what do I mean by that? That means that this connector can only plug into the drive correctly in one way. Now, I physically cannot push this into the back of the hard drive the wrong way. We take a look at the back of the hard drive. it's keyed as well. The power connector's keyed, it comes over and drops down, and the SATA cable comes over and drops down. So that I could take this, and I can't put it on there that way, right? The notch is in the up position, and the notch is in the down position, which means the only real way I could plug that in is by turning the drive and then pushing until you can't see any more gold. That's now fully connected. Now, there's no locking tab on this, so I can just safely pull that out so I can get the cage out and show you the rest. But this is easily one of the most basic things in a computer is to make sure that you're plugging them in the right way. One of the things that I can't show you, because I don't have one with me, but in the old school floppy drives, that people don't use anymore, their power connector was keyed, but you were still able to plug the connector in upside down. Now what that did is it still pushed on because it was 4 pins. There's 2 grounds in the middle, and then there was 2 rails on the outer ends. 5 volts, I think it's 5 volts and 12 volts, if I remember correctly. And when you plug the power connector on upside down, what you did is you put 5 volts where there needed to be 12 volts, and then you put 12 volts where you needed 5 volts. Now, only one of those two is going to cause a problem. If I put 5 volts into a rail that's expecting 12, nothing's going to happen. It's going to be undervoltaged and it won't cause damage. But if I put 12 volts into a rail that's expecting 5, that's going to cause a problem. That's going to cause component failure because you're putting more voltage into the rail than it's anticipating. That's when the magic smoke comes out, folks. We don't want the magic smoke to come out because when the magic smoke comes out of the computer, it stops working. By all means, don't do that. Okay, we're going to take this cage out. So to take the cage out in this particular HP computer, I need to grab a screwdriver. And with that screwdriver, I need the appropriate size, which I believe is a star T20, I think. I think you're T20. No, you're not T20. Then you are potentially your smaller size. You are a T15? Question mark? Yeah, all right, that's it, that's it. All right, so a T15. So a T15 is a star head. It's not Phillips. So it's got a star pattern on it, which is why it's called Starhead. Fancy that. Okay, so to get the cage out of here, I'm going to just point to it and then I'll let you take the screws out. The case is actually marked. It says right under here this word cage. So that screw right there has to come out. And then on the other side here is another screw right here underneath these I/O ports right there, and it's also labeled cage. So I have to remove that screw, and then inside of the case, which I'm going to attempt to point to here, down here is one more by my index finger that also it's not labeled cage, but it's holding the cage. So I can't slide this back because there's 2 screws in the front holding the face up, and then there's one down here holding it in place so it can't push back. I'm going to take these 3 screws out, and then this cage is going to push backwards. And I'm going to safely set them aside. I don't accidentally misplace them. Now, I already stressed to you once that I disconnected the power from this. Normally I would actually hold the power button. I actually kind of forgot to do that part, to be honest with you. But what's important is that I disconnected it. If one of these little screws were to fall in here and land in the fan shroud or land directly on the motherboard here, we could short some stuff out, and that would be bad. Even if the computer's off, if you don't de-energize all this stuff, that's a problem. Which actually, since I'm, going to talk from experience and not be a goober, I'm going to hold the power button for a second there. Okay. The fan didn't even spin, which means that was completely de-energized because I was talking. I gave it enough time for the power to leave the motherboard without me actually holding the button. But that's fine. It's very important to de-energize the equipment before working on it. So now I'm going to remove the last screw, which is this one right there. Okay. Screw. Now another thing about this is that all those 3 screws are the same size. If you're taking apart a computer and you're not familiar with the layout of the screws, I recommend laying down a piece of paper and marking where the screws came from. If you're not super sure that will work, take pictures of everything exactly as it is before taking it apart. I can't express to you how useful it is to take pictures of the way this is laid out before taking it apart. I've taken apart this workstation a bazillion times, so I'm familiar with it, but that doesn't mean you might be or you might not be. In the case of this one, we pull back. Now, nothing up my sleeve. There's the hard drive. Haha, hiding under the bottom. Now, this is actually held in here with, looks like, what, 2 screws? One. Ha! 1 screw is holding this in. So normally from the factory, there's 2 here, and then on the other side, another 2 here. But I've toyed with this computer a few times, so I've only got one of them holding it in here. I'm going to be honest with you. This is a spinning hard drive. I wouldn't recommend this configuration because that doesn't mean that the drive is fully supported. There are little rails down here that are going to hold it, but yeah, this is one of those cases of do as I say, not as I do, because I should definitely have had more screws in this, and I don't know where they went. Because the last thing, you don't want one of these hard drives to shake when they're running. So absolutely put all the screws in. If I had some spares, I'd do it right now, but I am not going to be digging out a hard disk anytime soon. You are correct. It is incredibly a very large hard disk. Now I am going to take this screw out just so I can show you in comparison of little guy versus bigger guy. Okay, so I took out that 1 screw that was retaining, and now I can actually just remove the cage. Okay, so now, hard drives. These are both 500 gig hard drives. They hold the same amount of data. 500 gig on this guy, and 500 gig on this guy, which is also much smaller. It's right there. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it, super duper tiny. But form factor wise, they're very, very different in size. This is a 3.5 inch hard drive. This is a 2.5 inch hard drive. That is how they're denoted, even though physically speaking, they look much different in size. But that's how you would, if you're talking about a hard drive, a 2.5 inch is this guy, the small guy. And actually, even though it's not imaged, this is a Kingston SSD. This guy right here is the same form factor as the hard disk. As you can actually see the motor there on the bottom here, and this one's an SSD, so that's not the case. But if I hold them up to each other, you're going to notice something here. The connectors are in exactly the same place. You've got power on the left, and you've got data on the right. And that is, that's good. That's all good. Yeah, you can by all means come in and lurk. I'm just here nerding out. Thank you for coming in to say hello. Exactly. Your SSD probably looks an awful lot like this. Now here's something that's going to blow your mind. 500 gig hard drive, same physical form factor, 120 gig SSD. It's significantly smaller in the quantity of storage in this drive in comparison to this one. They're physically the same form factor. And this one's significantly larger, but 500 gig, 120 gig. So all the more reason, read. By all means, for the love of all that is good in this world, read the documentation on the things that you're buying. Because if you look at the physical size of this stuff, that's not going to tell you anything. That won't do you any good at all. Now, here's the kicker, right? So actually, I was actually going to use the SSD. But as I had mentioned with CloneZilla, you can't go from a bigger hard disk to a smaller one without actually working with the individual partitions. If I were to have resized the partitions on this guy to make them smaller, to fit them onto this one, I know I could do that with the program, but to be completely honest, that's kind of outside the scope of what I wanted to show here. That gets confusing, it gets kind of complicated. It's not super, I'm not going to call it hard because it's not, but honestly, it looks so much worse. I mean, I don't know. What did you guys think? I showed you at least what it looked like to just meander through the advanced version of the clone tool just to do it disk to disk, and I mean, it looked kind of intimidating, but it's one of those things that it wasn't necessarily difficult, but messing with partition tables and making sure you put them in the right place is by far more complicated. Yeah, it certainly does. And the other thing too is that this particular computer, I actually didn't have an extra SATA power connector. It's only got one. So actually, without the enclosure, I wouldn't have actually been able to clone this machine without using a different type of drive. Now, if we actually take a look at the motherboard here, quick in here, you'll see that there's no M.2 on here on the gum stick storage, which I think I actually have one of those floating around in here. I do. Okay, so another one of these I'm going to show you. And it's open on this side. There's another SSD, but it's much smaller. Now this is a, I like to call them gum sticks because it looks like a stick of gum. It's an M.2 SSD. This holds 500 gigs of stuff. And if we look here, it's got this proprietary connector, or excuse me, not proprietary, a different connector that's different than SATA. I can't plug one of these SATAs into this. That's not compatible. And heaven forbid, if I got the stupid idea of sticking this into here, I might burn my house down. That would be bad. Don't do that. What these are designed to do is they're designed to actually be installed directly onto the motherboard in a slot that holds this whole thing that you would push it in, push down, and then put a little screw in here in the back to hold it in place. If this computer had that, I could have taken the data from this one and cloned it onto this one and then just pulled this out, or I could have erased this and then this is my new SSD. It takes up significantly less space than the 2.5 inch. And what's funny is that this holds more data than this one. This one's 120 gig, this is 500. Form factor wise, it's smaller, but the reality is that there's just newer technology in the gum stick over here. It's a different form factor, so I can't just take them in, one for one. I can't take out, if the computer had one of these and then swap it for the little guy, or one of these and swap it for this one, because it's just simply not going to work. If my operating system was on the Kingston, which is 120 gig here, I could have absolutely used CloneZilla to clone it onto the gum stick if this computer had that. This computer does not have that, so I couldn't do that. But that's why it helps to look at your computers. So, lunchtime, when it comes to the actual external external storage, so external storage would be like this. This is external storage. This is comparably one of these, but it's in a form factor that you can plug into the back of your computer with a USB cable. This is the USB 3.0 B connector, I think. It's been a while since I actually remember what these are called. But this you would not put Windows onto this drive. This would just be an additional amount of storage you can attach to your computer. Now, what I did with this one, this hard drive, I stuck into this enclosure. Right? So, I took this drive and I stuck it in here like that. And with this $10 plastic enclosure, I turned that internal hard drive into one of these. And it's got a USB on it. It's USB-C, right? And that actually allowed me to use this internal hard drive as an external device I can carry around with me. I can plug it into a computer and don't have to pop the side of the case off the computer. But the reality is that any of the parts inside of your computer can be replaced by the consumer. When that comes to, warranties and stuff, well, different manufacturers feel differently about that. If you buy a new computer, pop the bottom off of it and, put in, exactly, 100% is a win. But you can do that, right? You can upgrade your storage, because say that your computer came with the 120 gig SSD and you wanted to pop in the 500 gig one, now if it was the same form factor as this, then it would just be a no-brainer. You would clone it and then just switch them. Now on this particular computer, there's the hard drive cage, right? Now one of the things you're going to see here is that there's a lot of different hole patterns on this. So this particular case was designed to work with a couple different types of hard drives. Now in the case of this one, this is the 3.5 inch. That's actually another thing too, I actually want to point out here. There is a bunch of places to put screws on one of these. You've got 4 holes on the bottom. You've got 3 on each side, which equates to 6 different configurations you can choose that you can actually do. And this is interesting because then that gives you a couple different ways you can install this into a computer, right? So a lot of custom built rigs that you can buy today. The cases usually have the hard drives so that they sit in a bay that they'll install probably like this. Some of them are actually hardware listed. There's little nubs of plastic that'll stick in where the screws go, and then you just slide it inside of the computer, and then you don't actually have to put screws in all of these. But some of them you actually screw into the case. In the case of the HP here, we put it so that we slide it into the cage, and then you line up the holes with the knockouts. So there's 2 on this side, and there's 2 on this side that are also accessible, but you also have to feed that through the top of the hole here to get to that. And even as stamped right here, 3-5, and in here, 2-5. Well, there's a reason for that. The 2-5 configuration stands for 2.5 inch. Which is why, if we look at the bottom of one of these SSDs, there's 4 holes on the bottom. And then there's 2 on the side. Now, if you take a look here, something a little interesting that I don't know if my camera will focus on, but the hole on the side matches up with the hole on the bottom. You can only put the screw in one way. You can either go in from the bottom or from the top. You can't do both, right? Because it shares the same actual physical space in here. That's not the case on one of these guys. I could put screws in the bottom and screws in the side, and they're different parts of the drive. So I could use all of them. I can make it so this hard drive doesn't move ever. But that's a little overkill. The reason that there's all those different holes, though, is so that you can put it in a bunch of different places to work with a bunch of different case layouts. And that's fine. Okay, so if it's an SSD that's not screwed down, that's fine. I'm going to tell you why. This is a pack of zip ties. I could just zip tie this inside of the computer and it'd be fine, for a couple of reasons. There is no exposed metal on this SSD. All there is the connector end here on the back that the power and data plug into, but nothing else on the actual drive here can I short out, which means that I could just zip tie this to that metal cage and it's not going to go anywhere. That's perfectly fine. What isn't perfectly fine is the other one, which I have here somewhere. Yeah, this one. This one or the 2.5 inch. You do not, under any circumstances, want to just zip tie this in the case. There's moving pieces in this. And as I had mentioned earlier, that I should definitely have more than one screw holding this into the cage. There's spinning pieces. You don't want this moving around while it's trying to read or write data. Because the thing is the inside of one of these, if we were to take the cap off of this hard drive, you're going to see a super shiny platter in here, and then what's called the seek arm. It's a little arm that moves back and forth that floats over the top of the platters. And from there, it permits you to be able to read and write the data at, and what's the case of this one? This one, 5,400 RPM. I'm going to look at the sticker. I don't know what the speed of this guy is. This is a 7.2K. Oh, this is 7,200. Okay, this is a slightly faster hard drive. So I can tell you right now that actually, I think it's stamped on the bottom of here. Is that a thing? Almost all external hard drives are 5,400 RPM for the most part. But obviously you can look up the model of what you're holding. I'm pretty sure this one's 5,400 RPM, which means that the disk spins 5,400 times or 5,400 times per second. It spins pretty fast. This one, the bigger one, spins at 7,200 or 7,200 rotations per minute. Excuse me, minute, not second. That'd be real fast. And the speed is just how fast it can seek. So the faster the disk spins, the faster it can seek the data. But something else to keep in mind is that the faster it spins, then the quicker it will burn out. They all have a life to them, and hard disks are generally in the line of 3 to 5 years is the useful life for a hard drive. Now, obviously, computers that have these in them last longer than 5 years. It happens. But the thing is that if you take a look at the statistics on how long one of these will last for, that's what you're going to find. You can ask Google that right now. I think it says between 3 and 5. If you just ask Google very politely, what can I do? That's what it's going to tell you. Okay. Got that put away, put my zip ties away. Okay, so as I had mentioned, I cloned that. I was looking for this and I forgot I stuck it back in this enclosure. I'm like, what did I do with it? I'm a goob. I misplaced it.
You have reached the voicemail box of Kino.
Excellent. Okay. So, we're gonna be careful with this because this is metal. There's a circuit board on the back. Now this is one of those that not only is it a mechanical drive, which means that there's spinning pieces, so we can't just zip tie this in the case. But there's also exposed circuits on the back, which means that if I were to just take this and just zip tie it like that in there, bad stuff's going to happen. If at some point you ended up with an SSD that actually had exposed circuits on the back, by all means do not zip tie to a piece of metal in the case. You're going to have a bad time. You're going to break your SSD, you're probably going to blow up your power supply, and there's a really good chance you might damage your motherboard. But in the case of this one, I know that there's nothing exposed. This one very much is. That would be bad. We don't want to do that. 100%. Oh, good evening, Ally. Good to see you. It's been a hot minute. I'm here geeking out to the rest of the internet about storage. We're actually just about to stick this one, the 2.5 inch here, back into the case. Because we're going to boot to it. Because we cloned it. So we originally had our computer operating system on this guy, the bigger one, and then we cloned it onto this one. Using CloneZilla, we booted from this one. So we used 3 pieces of storage to make ourselves a very interesting evening. So yes, so in the case here, to not injure myself, I'm not going to put the optical drive back in. All I'm going to do is I'm just going to hook up this to show you that it worked. So I'm going to plug in SATA for data, SATA for power. Now actually, before I move on here, there are 4 wires here. There are 2 blacks, a yellow, and a red. And what we have here is we have 5 volts, 12 volts, and 2 grounds. The grounds are the 2 black wires, and then I believe 12 volts is red and 5 volts is yellow. We're going to check that. I'm going to look that up. But those are the 2 voltages I know we have here. Which, no, I don't have one of those sitting out. I was going to say I'd grab a power supply tester, but I do not have one that would be reasonably accessible in the span of time that I would have to go get it. But that's fine. So yeah, we'll look that up quick. We'll pop that guy on there. Now again, this is keyed. I can't plug this in upside down. I'd have to actually break the tab off the hard drive, and that would be bad. Okay, so now in an effort, so I want to boot this, but I also don't want to short it out, right? So I'm going to take our case front and very casually lay it in there. Now, as I had mentioned, you don't want the hard drive to move, right? But in the case here, it's sitting on a workbench, so it's not going to go anywhere. But by all means, you would normally secure this to the inside of the case, not just lay it out here like I'm about to. Another fantastic case. If you can look at it, it looks pretty, but by all means, please actually secure your stuff. You want things to go well in the span of what we have going on. Okay, we got power, folks. We're about to have a good time. I'm going to plug the video cable back in, which is this guy, which is HDMI, back into our motherboard. I'm going to stick this in the back, and then I'm going to switch scenes and hit the power button. Well, actually, before I do that, I'm actually going to switch scenes now because I'm pretty sure this powers on without me clicking the button, if I remember correctly. Or actually, I could just do that. You're going to see some fans spinning. And my lights blinked. That's exciting. I'm glad we're still here. Okay. I'm going to give this a second while we boot back up. Did I plug in the right cables? We're going to see here in a minute. That's better. I'm like, well, there should be something appearing on the screen. I don't see it, but we should have it. It's fine. It's perfectly fine. Don't worry about it. My word. Indeed. Yes, we are here as a bunch of casual people. And look at that. It booted! It booted. And it did more than it booted. It cloned. So if I do the partition, that guy, we're going to see one drive and one drive only because I didn't hook everything else back up. Ooh, I lied. What did I plug in? No, I didn't lie. What is that? Movable disk F, no media. Oh, I know what that is. I'm going to show you so I know what that is. Okay. As I'm actually going to switch seats here. That's not good. Yeah, let's see here. We want this one. Nope. 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 That's the one we want. Okay. So, oh, I can't move it because it's running. I'm gonna have to shut this back off. All right, hang on a minute. please stand by. We're gonna take a second here. I gotta shut this bag off. Ba 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 ba. We're gonna shut it back off for a second here. I forgot to mention this. I actually did not point this out when I had it on the bench here earlier. Okay. We're off now, so I'm going to disconnect the power. I'm going to hold the power button. Okay, and we're not spinning. Okay, we're going to go back in, but I meant to show you something. So I forgot to account for, when I was talking, the storage that was connected to the computer. Now, as we saw earlier with the CD-ROM drive, this guy, even though it, I didn't have a disk in here, it still showed up in the operating system, and it was a drive we could choose, and we can click the little button, and it would pop out and show us the disk, right? That was something that we anticipated. But this is a pre-in-one built computer, or excuse me, a pre-built computer. That's the words I'm looking for. And on the front of this is a card reader. Right here. So when you have a card reader that's in the front of your computer, or just in your computer, frankly, it doesn't have to be on the front, that shows up as its own hard drive, or excuse me, as its own drive letter. So it's a permanent storage handling method that shows up in the operating system that's actually hard connected to the motherboard. So if we follow the wires back here, it's actually this one right here underneath this wire here. I'm going to show you this with my hand. It's this one right here. And that is a drive that will permanently show up unless I disconnect that from the motherboard, which is why we show two drives, not one. Okay, let me plug that back in. We'll get back in to Windows. Bear with me here. I forgot to point that out earlier. Hiya, okay. Got him. Fantastic. The fan meant to be crooked. It's not crooked. The fan blades are angled, or if that's what, if you're calling that crooked, then yes, it's designed to be like that. The fan blades themselves have an angle to them so that when they spin, it generates lift, and that actually blows the air through the heatsink down here. So underneath this fan and this heatsink is the processor. The square, it's sideways. I'm not sure what other fan you're talking about. Because we have the one here that's Cooler Master, that's the one for the processor. And then the only other one that we have that's a fan would be a small one that's in the power supply in the bottom of the case, which is down here, living down here. Yeah, admittedly, that is pretty cool looking. Yes. All right. So I'll plug this guy back in. We're gonna boot back into Windows. Okay. We'll give this a brief moment. This commercial break is brought to you by Patience. There we go. Gotta grab my mouse. Hee hee. Oh, I like this music. It's very spooky sounding. Excellent. We have a functioning computer. Fancy that. All right, good. Now I can go back into disk management. Ah, I ran the wrong utility. Oh, that makes me sad. Oh, you guys can't hear the music? All right, hang on. Let me refresh that. Or wait a minute. I know why you can't hear it. Ah, all right, hold up a minute. We gotta fix that. Okay, so it would have stopped, and now you should be able to hear it again. Fabulous. Okay. I forgot to add the music to this scene, which is why you couldn't hear it. Okay, much better. All right, we're gonna try this again by me typing the right thing into the box. Let's see, disk part. Haha! For the partition manager. Much better. And we're just gonna wait patiently for it to open. Okay. Yes, I went on my own tangent here because that was important. The fact that there was one more drive here that shows up that we don't have connected to the computer. I just showed you what storage is connected to it, and there wasn't a second one. Now we know what drive F is and why it's there. Which actually, if we go into here, here's something interesting. So even though that drive is there, and we can see it in disk management, it doesn't show up in the operating system until you plug something into it. So if I had a SD card, which is what that size of that slot is for, it will show up inside of Windows and then will mount into the disk manager or the Windows Explorer interface. But the actual drive itself always is visible inside of the partition manager. Or disk management is what it's called. It says there at the top of the screen, disk management. But this is where we manage partitions, which is also why I called it the partition manager. If I disconnect that cable from the motherboard with it off and power it back on, this drive will disappear. We won't see it anymore because it won't be it will no longer be interfacing with the motherboard. So as far as the computer's concerned, it's gone because it doesn't have anything to talk to. But now what we have something exciting. We have a computer that started. It started! It started because you know what we did? We cloned it. And we have just what we started with. We have 3 partitions. We have the first partition, which is the boot partition. It's 100 meg in size. That one points to the local C drive, which is the one that we see within Windows, which is this one right here. That's the one that you're familiar with seeing. And if I pull up the properties on this window, I'm gonna try that again and not misclick. Hiya. Through the power of clicking the right thing, we can see here that there is free space of 431 gig and 33.8 gig in use. If you add them together, that doesn't exactly equate to 500 gig. But the reason it doesn't equate to 500 gig is because the partition that is the C drive is this one right here. The partition is 465.15 gig in space. That partition is this drive letter, the C drive. The storage that's taken up from the other 2 partitions, the one that's 100 meg here on the left, and the one that's 509 meg on the right, do not show up, and they don't have drive letters. Now, under normal circumstances, this is not something you would do, but I'm going to do it anyway. It doesn't do any harm, and I'm going to undo it when I'm done. But if I wanted to see the contents of this drive, I can assign a letter to it, and we can actually see what's in it. We're going to do that. I'm going to right-click on the partition. Oh, it won't let me do it. Windows won't let me hurt myself. But Dad, come on. That's terrible. Oh, God almighty. All right, that's fine. So under normal circumstances, if they're not protected, these are yeah, my God, words. These are protected partitions of the system. Windows knows that I shouldn't be stupid and I shouldn't delete them, but it also actually won't let me put letters on them, which is frankly a little disappointing. If I put it into another operating system, then we could browse these other drives, or excuse me, these other partitions and see what's in them. But without sticking a letter on them, as far as the rest of the computer's concerned, we won't be able to see them in this screen unless they have a letter. That's pretty much the big thing within Windows. If you have a hard drive, or excuse me, storage in general, hard drive, flash drive, SSD of any kind, any of the hard drive enclosures, Windows operating system is based on letters. It's letters A through Z. Fancy that, I know. Now, I'm not actually going to change it, but I actually I should be able to show you if it's not grayed out. Yeah, I can pull this up still. All right, fantastic. So if I could do this to those other partitions, this is what I would have did. I would have went to change drive letter and then click change. And then from here, it shows you all the other available letters of the alphabet that are usable. If a hard drive, or excuse me, if a drive letter is in use, it will not show up in the list. As you notice right now, the letter F and the letter C are both missing from the list. There's a reason for that. They're both in use. The C drive is Windows. The F drive is the card reader on the front that's not currently in use. It still uses the letter, and it's not visible until we plug something into it, but it's taken. And that's fine. But if you're trying to figure out why, when you plug something in, that the drive letter F is never in use, this is why. It's hidden. It's in use. It's taken. You just need to know where to look. Which is exciting. Alright, I'm not actually going to change this because I don't really know what would happen if I changed the C drive to something different. I don't think this would boot. Well, I mean, this is a clone of the operating system. We can't. All right, chat. All right, chat. We're going to try to break the computer. What drive letter you want? Pick one. Pick one. We're going to reboot it and see what happens. I was going to erase this hard drive anyway when we were done. So what drive letter do you want to use? I have absolutely no idea if this will do something bad. So we're going to try it. Come on, no one wants to be able to pick a letter from the English alphabet for me. I think you're capable. K? Alright, I'll take K. That sounds good. Nope, that was J. I want K. Alright, now I'm full disclosure. I have no idea if this is even gonna let me apply this change, but we're gonna try it anyway. Alright, this is Windows telling me that bad things might happen. Some programs that rely on drive letters might not run correctly. Do I want to continue? Frankly, yes, I do want to continue, because I don't know. I have very strong suspicions that the computer's not going to reboot after I make this change. We're going to find out what happens. Oh, that's a shame. The parameter is incorrect. Windows won't let me harm myself, and that's probably a good thing. I do like that it lets me go that far, though, and then doesn't let me change the drive letter. Oh, good lord. It's fine. We don't need to injure ourselves. That would be bad. We don't want to do that. Oh, that's okay. We don't want to do bad stuff anyway. It's not a big deal. But you know what I do want to do? Is I actually do want to clean up this disk. And for me to do that, we need to boot back into the other one. So I think I'm actually going to show you how we would take that disk that we're currently using and erase it. Because erasing it is going to be slightly a little bit more difficult than what you might be anticipating. Because something happens within the Windows operating system. Right now we're running Windows. Fancy that, I know. Stay with me. We're running Windows. And now that we're running Windows, Windows knows something. Windows knows that that partition on the left and the partition on the right are both protected. Which means that I should not be able to delete these under normal circumstances. And if I right click on them, the option to delete it's not there. And if I right click on this one, the option to delete it is grayed out, which means it won't let me. If I right click on the C drive, the option to format the drive is also unavailable, which is probably a good thing, because we wouldn't want to injure ourselves. Now here's something interesting. The Linux operating system, which CloneZilla uses, is more than willing to let you erase the bootloader and format the operating system when it's running. It's more than happy to let you do that. I need you to understand something. If you're going to tinker with the Linux, you need to understand that the operating system is more than willing to let you injure yourself. You have to be careful in Linux, because Linux, even though it has the ability to lock files, you have so much more power in the operating system in Linux that can permit you to, well, do things to the computer that you may not necessarily know the outcome of. Now, within the Windows operating system, this is something right here that has shown that I couldn't do what I wanted to find out what was going to happen to those partitions because they're locked. Windows is smart enough to know that if it's running off of itself, that it probably shouldn't delete itself. Linux doesn't very much give you that grace. It's more than happy to let you hurt yourself. You have to be careful. But okay, enough talk. I'm going to shut this off. We're going to put the other hard drive back in. And then I'm going to put this hard drive that we're running back into the enclosure. We're going to boot it. And then I'm going to show you how to erase it, because we're going to run into some trouble with that. But there's a way around the problem. So let's get going here. Okay. We're now back to the point where we can do some stuff. So we're going to start by disconnecting power from the case and start disconnecting some stuff. So I'm going to take apart our 2.5 inch. And we're going to take the 2.5 inch drive, put it back in this enclosure. This is now safe. Leave back in its little case. And I can take its cable, and now this one is ready to be connected once I put the rest of the computer back together. We're now going to take our enclosure. We're going to take it so that the connectors on this slide in like so. We're going to line up our screws here. Now, something that I do want to point out, which may be kind of concerning. This is something I find interesting about HP computers with these little drive cages. We have a circuit board on the back here, and we definitely don't want to short it out against something metal. This cage is made of metal, and I'm installing it like this. It's going in that way. But here's the thing. You see how these are raised? There's bumps. That keeps this board off of the metal that's looming directly below it. Which means if this desktop computer in transit was dropped, there's a chance that this drive cage could get bent. Now, it's inside of the computer. You would have to do some pretty bad stuff to actually damage this while it's inside the machine. But stay with me here. If these bumps don't keep the right distance, this is going to sit up against the metal. That would be bad. We don't want that. So we're going to reinstall this, which then makes our I/O available to us, our in-out. I'm going to put the screw back in. You should put in more than one. I only have one. Do as I say, not as I do. If I knew where the rest of the screws went to this, I would put them in. I don't care how much time it would take me, but I don't have them. So I can't do it. So, our connectors are here. On the bottom of this are these locking spacers. So what's going to happen is that this these 3 points are going to lock into the case. So I'm going to flip this dude over. I'm going to very carefully move these cables out of the way, and I'm going to lock it back into the tabs. They're very lovingly sitting on the bottom of the case. Okay, that's all it takes. And then I'm going to put the screws back in. So I got that one there. And at this point, I actually can't pull back on this anymore because that one screw is holding the whole thing in place. I'm still going to put the 2 in the front. But at this point, even with one, it's still secured. Not enough. We're gonna go the whole distance. That means I can put it away when I'm done. Put that guy back in, and we're gonna put this guy back in. Got that, which is nice. And then I'm gonna put our face back on. So to put the face back on, there are little notches that are on this side, and then these were the releasing tabs that are on the inside that you don't normally see when you put the side of the case back on, which means that you have to line this up with the respective holes on the other side of the case. So to show that, I'm going to very lovingly flip this upside down and show you there's a knockout there in the case. There is a semi-square hole there, and there's 3 of them on the side of the case. We line that up, and then it'll lock into place. That locked into place, and we have a face on our computer again. Now, we still want to put our optical drive back in, which we're going to do. And the cool thing about this is this actually locks it into place. So all I have to do is from the front, push this back in. I cannot push this in from the back. It came out through the front, which means that when you reinstall it, it has to go from the front back in through back into the back. This is going to lock into place when I push it. And that's it. It's locked into place. It won't go anywhere. And there is now no longer a hole in the front of the computer because there's no drive in the way now. From this point, we have 4 cables we have to hook back up. We got the data and power to the optical drive, and then the power and data to the hard drive, which is down here. So, as I had mentioned previously, the optical drive has a proprietary power connector. This can only get plugged into the optical drive inside this computer. It can be used for nothing else. So if I didn't put this optical drive back in, this cannot be used for anything. It's just a thing. So we're gonna plug that guy in, and then I'm also gonna plug this in until it clicks. It's a very nice little click. It also can't come back out because it's got the locking tab. Keeps everything nicely seated. All right, that then leaves us our 2 other cables. We got data and power. Oh yeah, I forgot. I want to check and see what the colors are in relationship. Yeah, I'm pretty sure 12 volts is yellow and the 5 volts is red. We're going to check though. I'm going to check that when I sit back down. I'm pretty sure that would be the case in this case, which is frankly a nice little case. Gotta love it. Okay, we got that, and then computer side we have right here. Okay, so on your computer side, a lot of stuff going on here. So there is a rail on the bottom. There are little locking notches that are on the front. And then another rail on this side. So easily one of the most frustrating things is putting a side back on a computer. I don't care what kind of case it is. I don't care if it's plexiglass. I don't care if it's metal. Putting the sides on a computer is a pain. It just is. There's very few computers that I enjoy taking the sides of the cases off, and this is frankly no different. So depending on your computer, a couple things might happen. You might have to actually start the top of the case and then push down. Some of these you line at the bottom first and then push to the front. Or some of these you start from the back and push forward. In the case of this case, all puns intended, you are welcome, we start from the back and push forward. I'm going to line up the bottom here, and I'm going to get it flush, and then I'm going to push forward. Now when I pushed forward, I lost the sign of all the silver on this side of the case. That means that this is fully seated all the way to the right. In the back is a screw. There's only a single screw that holds this in place. That guy right there. So, with my screwdriver and my T15, I'm going to tighten that back down. There. the side is now seated. I can't back this out. And now we can see we have our vent holes are nice and visible, which is good, because when it comes to this computer running, we want the airflow to make its way into and out of the case. So we have grills here, here, and on the top of the case as well, which I will show you when I stand it up here, which is right there. That is all the different spaces that the thing has room for air to move. Now, some computer cases are designed with additional vents on the bottom. This one is not. So if we flip it over to the bottom, there's no vents. We take a look at the front, there's no vents. Different cases are designed different ways to be able to do what they need to do in the way of airflow. And this one is just basically the back, and this side, and the top. When it comes to that, if you have a fancier computer or a fancier case, what happens is you're going to have probably additional fans. And something you need to be mindful of is that case fans have a direction in them. Air flows in one direction when you install the fan. And if you take a look at a fan, it'll show you a little arrow saying air in this direction. There's a little arrow that points in the direction that the airflow goes in. When you install that fan into your case, you have to think about which way you want your air to flow. So if you have big spaces on the back for fans, you might want those to blow into the case and then have fans in the front that blow out of the case. So the air comes in through the front and then shoots straight out the back. If you had fans that blow in from the back and in from the front, well, now you've got air clashing in two different areas that then meet each other in the case, and then air is not exactly flowing, it's more of crashing into itself. If you have that, then you need ventilation on the top for the air to then be sucked up and out of the case, so that the cold air comes in the front, cold air comes in from the back, and then exhausts up and out of the case. In the case of power supplies, usually they bring air in through the back and shoot them straight out the bottom of the case in custom rigs. In this one little HP guy, it goes in through the back, into the case, and then from inside of the case out through one of the vents. So there's two fans. There's one on the processor, and then there's one on the power supply. And those are the only two responsible for keeping the computer cool, which means that if this computer is in a very hot environment, you may find that it doesn't work right because it may need additional cooling. There's nothing wrong with that, but you might find that if you buy a computer off the shelf without proper airflow for your setup, your environment, you might find that it doesn't work the way you anticipated to, regardless of the hardware that's inside. This computer is pretty much basically for just browsing the internet, not really a whole much more than that, because of the hardware that's in it. But when it comes to application of this being somewhere, if this was sitting outside, chilling out on a patio, when it's 100 degrees outside for outdoor events, covered in safe from rain and things like that naturally, but all that additional heat of being under a pavilion, this might not work right because it gets too hot. And then the processor has issues, and then you're like, why the heck does this thing not work? I didn't pay a lot for it, but it should have worked. Well, that might be because there's no airflow and it's choking on itself. Very important. Airflow, by all means, when it comes to a desktop computer. Same thing when it comes to laptops, but frankly, there's not a whole lot you can do about laptop computers and cooling. I'm going to switch us back over here. With laptops, there's cooling pads you can get your hands on that don't necessarily do a whole lot, but the biggest thing when it comes to cooling in laptops is not sticking your laptop on your actual lap, like your pants, or a blanket or a bed, because then it actually obstructs the airflow from the bottom of the laptop. One of the things when it comes to laptop computers is that most of them pull in air from the side or directly from the bottom. And if it's pulling air directly from the bottom of the case and you have it sitting on a blanket, well, guess what? It's going to choke. It's not going to move any air, and the heat is going to start to build up at the fan, which can cause the fan to prematurely fail. It can cause airflow not to happen so that the processor is warmer than it's supposed to be, the graphics is warmer than it's supposed to be, all the other chips in the motherboard are warmer than they're supposed to be. And then, surprise, surprise, the computer locks up. It doesn't work correctly. It acts sluggish. Other strange phenomenon that don't seem to be repeatable. That's one of the most frustrating things in the computer space, is not being able to repeat something when it comes to troubleshooting. Overheating is a very difficult thing to troubleshoot, because if what's causing the overheating isn't consistent, then it might be troublesome to figure out what's causing the problem. In all means, in the space of computers, that one's important. By all means. Okay, so I have the disconnected now. Let me grab my mouse here. All right, I connected it. I see it connected. I don't know. You know what probably has to happen? I probably have to initialize the disk. All right, hang on. We got to do some stuff. So I physically connected that to the computer. As you can see, the USB is plugged in. But inside of Windows, you don't see it. Well, it's there. It's just hiding. We have to go back into the disk management. Okay. So there's some stuff that shows up in here now, and we're going to account for all of the disks. First disk is disk 0 or the C drive. This is the one that we're currently running off of. This is that big 3.5-inch hard drive that I put back in the cage that is screwed in place in the case. So there is our primary boot partition, the Windows partition, or drive letter C, which is the one everybody's used to, and then the recovery partition, which is there on the end. Now, we have our removable F drive, which is saying no media. That's the card reader on the front. And then our CD-ROM drive is back because I plugged it in. All right. Now, in the middle here is this one, disk 2. It's got a little red down arrow next to it and a status of offline and basic. Offline is why it's not showing up in the operating system, because the disk itself is not spun up. To do that, I'm going to click on it and choose online. Okay. Now that did a couple of things. That spun the disk up, and then it assigned a drive letter to the partition that Windows would normally live on, and it assigned it drive D. That was the next available letter in the operating system. And now it shows up in here. And then here is the duplicate on that HTC drive that's on that USB plugged into the computer. Now, I want to completely format that disk so that there's nothing on it. I don't want any partitions on it. Well, I could right-click on this drive and choose Format. And then click Start. It's going to warn me we're about to erase everything on it. It's perfectly fine. We're going to do it anyway, because I want to erase the disk. Now, something important is that the Quick Format box was checked there. If we didn't have that selected, this would take very long, because then it has to actually erase every I think it's like a bit-by-bit erase. By the way it sets up the format, or excuse me, the way it formats the partition, takes so much longer to set up. Okay, so I'm going to close that wizard. We can now see that there's nothing in here, but if we look over here, we still have these. I don't need these anymore. This is no longer a Windows-based drive, which means that I'm going to do a couple of things here. I'm going to delete the volume. Say yes. That did two things. It removed it from within Windows. I deleted the partition, which means if there was data on it, that would now be gone, but that was intentional. It removed the drive letter, and now it's just unallocated space on that hard drive. Now, as you can clearly see, these two partitions are still here. If I right-click on them, I don't have the option to delete them. That one doesn't, and that one doesn't. Reason B, these are still considered system protected partitions. The Windows operating system knows to leave these alone, so it won't let me do it from within the GUI, or the graphical user interface, or this menu we're looking at. They're all the same name. We have to open up a special tool to get rid of these. It's built into Windows. This is one of those. If you don't know it exists, then you should leave it alone. going to open up a command prompt. I'm going to type disk part. Okay, so within disk part, whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. I am now in a, this is an actual application I'm in now. Disk part is a partitioning software in Windows, but it's solely command line. There's no graphical user interface. You need to know what you're doing and then type the appropriate commands. Now, this is another one of those things I'm going to tell you. You need to be careful if you plan on doing this yourself. Don't delete the wrong partitions, because this is one of those utilities that's more than happy to let you delete stuff you actually need. Best be careful. Now, we're going to use these in conjunction here. Oh, I want to move the window. Okay, so we now know that our non-system drive is disk 2, because it says it right here, right? It says disk 2. So within here, I'm going to do the list disk command. And from here, it shows me 3 volumes. Disk 0, 1, and 2. Disk 1 is that removable card reader on the front of the computer that we're not actively using. And then disk 2 is the hard disk that we have that's in that little hard drive enclosure, the HTC drive. Or that's not the right letters. That's fine. You know what I mean, the 2.5-inch one. So we need to modify that disk. So we're going to select disk 2. It's now going to tell us that disk 2 is now selected. I am now going to do a list partition. It now shows us that we have a total of 3 partitions. Partition 1, 2, and 4. Now, we don't see the reserve partition, but that's another one that's there, interestingly enough, that you can't see within the normal GUI interface. You can only see that from this command line utility. It's there, you can't see it. I'm not necessarily sure why that doesn't show up, but that's just the way that Windows does what Windows does. We're going to delete all 3 of them. So I am going to have to select these one at a time, and we're going to delete partition 1, 2, and 4. So I'm going to select partition 1, and then I am going to do the question mark to get the command list up. And then if I remember correctly, I might have to Google this. I believe it is delete partition. It's delete partition override. Okay, so I purposely didn't do the override, right? I want to show you this first. If I don't type the word override, it says that you cannot delete the protected partition without the force parameter. That means this is protected. Are you sure you actually want to do what you're about to do? And the answer is yes, we do want to do it. So we're going to do override. Now check something out. In the background, in the GUI utility, this went from blue to black. And it shows here that it is unallocated space, which means we're on our way. So now I'm going to do a select partition 2. Oof, can't spell. I actually don't know if I can delete that partition. Partition 4, override. Oh, I have to switch to it. That's right. Bug. Select EARTITION 4. Delete. Partition 4. We are... Oh, that's right. You don't get the volume number. That's right. It's just delete partition override. And I can do that to 2 now. Okay. Now we've reached the point that it actually just now looks like one solid block, right? There was, for a time there, partition 2 was that chunk of 100 meg. It's the first 16, I don't know if it's the first 16, I don't know. 16 meg of that 100 meg was the reserve that you don't see, which puts up that little barrier inside of this. And then from there, we erased it. Under normal circumstances, I'd be able to see that terminal window a little closer, but since I'm showing all of you and I'm not directly in front of that monitor, it's a little hard to see from my seat. I also can't spell. That doesn't help my case. But now, that hard disk has nothing on it. I can exit that utility, because we're done with it. Now, as advertised, we're back to where we started. We started with Windows up here, a hard drive with nothing on it, and then our 2 unused drives, the C drive and the card reader. And that is how you clone a hard drive from beginning to end. That's also how you reuse a hard drive if you have one with a bunch of partitions on it. You absolutely can set up multiple partitions on a hard drive. You don't have to use the whole drive. But the reality is that most people don't need multiple partitions. I am also one of those people. I don't need multiple partitions. There's also different partition table types and things like that, but we're not going to go into that tonight. I'm progressively starting to lose my voice. Yes. Amongst all that madness, do I have any questions? I'm curious if you have any, because I've shown quite a few things here. And that's okay if you don't. It's perfectly fine. Okay, lay it on me. What you got? I'm going to grab some water while you're thinking about that. Hydrate, people. It's important. Right, so this particular program, CloneZilla, the mode of doing a disk-to-disk clone will fail because it'll tell you the disk is too small. What you need to do is you need to then do a clone based on partition with this particular software. You have to actually make the partitions smaller and then actually do a partition-to-partition copy. So that then you would tell the software you're going to move this partition, and this partition, but then shrink this one. All right, so we can easily shrink this. If I just right click on it and then go to shrink volume. You would need to do this before booting into that software, by the way. What you do then is then you make this number smaller. I can't see those values from where I'm sitting. They're too small for me on screen. But pretty much what you do is that you then reduce this number to make it smaller. But not smaller than the actual in-use amount of storage. So if I go to the C drive here, I go to properties, I can't make this smaller than 38.8 gig. If that's what it says there on the screen. Again, tiny words, tiny letters. Yeah, you just resize it so that the partition's smaller. And then you would then tell the software to clone it one partition at a time, and then choose the smaller version of that partition to make it so that all three partitions are under the size of the disk. So if I have a 1 terabyte hard drive and I want to stick it onto a 500 gig hard drive, then I have to make the partition table for the C drive small enough that it fits on a 500 gig hard drive, with the exclusion of the 100 meg and the 509 meg partition. Add them together, and as long as those three partitions together are under 500 gig, then it'll fit, and then it'll work. But by all means, like I said, there's other programs that are out there that do that operation a little nicer. And I'm actually going to pull that up on stream here so I can just show you real quick. Okay, so Macrium, M-A-C-R-I-U-M, is Macrium. And this software, they do have a free version. There's also a trial version. Like, so if you're a home user, you can get started with home. And it'll walk you through the process of making a bootable flash drive. That was something I didn't show tonight because honestly that would have just added more time, frankly, that I don't have, for us to spend this evening on that. If anybody wants to see that though, I can do that in a future stream. Show you how to make some bootable media. I did that with Rufus in their live ISO tool, which was handy. But yeah, this one free for home use. This one's got a nice GUI that it boots into, and then you can like drag and drop. And then I'm pretty sure that as long as you, I'm pretty sure the action of resizing to make it smaller is built into the program. Like, you don't have to tell it you want to do that. You just say, here's the first disk, here's the second one, and then it figures it out in the middle that the C partition has to be smaller. And then things are pretty good from that. Excuse me. I'm starting to lose my voice. Yay! Okay. Bloop. That's fine. That's good. That'll happen for talking for like 2 hours to the world here. Yeah, I'll be fine. So yes. So if anybody else has any ideas for class, poke me on Twitter. Or just, drop it here in chat if you have something in the future you would like to see. This evening, I am going to take us all over to a gentleman that I met just recently. His name is Philip Hatson Games. He's a very nice gentleman, and I'm going to bring us all over there to say hello. So I'm going to ask you to all stick around for the raid, and thank you all very much for coming and humoring me tonight. This was a lot of fun, and I'm planning on doing another stream next Wednesday. So thank you all for sticking around, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye!